Hello there, my name's Phil Cowdell. It's my real pleasure to be here today and talk to you about being a conscious business. Now, being a conscious business is different from just being a business. Being a conscious business is about finding the balance between doing good business, but also doing good for people and planet. What I'm going to share with you today is really how we address some of the challenges of social media and the possibility for the advertising industry to make a positive societal impact. So, social media, let's just start there. It can be supremely helpful, but it also can be incredibly harmful. If we think about the helpful side of social media, you've got creativity, you've got inspiration, you've got information, you've got how-to videos, you've got people creating new businesses, so it's monetization, it's income, you've got value creation, you've got representation, you've got inclusion, you've got self-esteem, you've got wellness, lots of really, really good things. But you've also got some really harmful things. As you know from social media, it's also a platform that helps communicate bias, misinformation. It's contributed to defunding news. There's fake content. You've got overblocking. You've got exclusion. You've got discrimination. You've got harassment. You've got abuse. You've got bullying. You've got violence. You've got some really bad stuff. So what can we as the advertising community that frankly pays and funds the social media landscape do to make a difference with that? What I'm going to share with you today is sort of 4 areas that allow us to tip the balance away from the harmful and towards the helpful. And the more we do that, the more we drive media wellness. So the 4 areas I'd like to share with you, the first one's going to be how to be a conscious business and the choices we make when we set up our business. The second one is really walking you through the 4 phases of consciousness, how you go from being sort of not aware that there's a problem into being spontaneously avoiding and creating a better solution. The third one is getting into the real world application of this. So we think about how does this make a difference to our jobs today, tomorrow, the day after, what we do, what our teams do. And then finally, we're going to talk about the road ahead. So really just give you some tips of how you can consciously make a difference to society and your business. So that's the agenda for today. I'm going to start with being a conscious business. What's interesting here is we all have a choice. We can be motivated for profit, or we can be motivated for good. And in the world of charities and public companies and stock market returns and opportunities for driving value, it's really easy to get caught up in just the for profit, regardless of the consequences. We'd all love to be altruistic and do things for good, but if for good doesn't create profit and revenue, it doesn't create an opportunity for scale, expansion, and influence. So the magic of this, what we're trying to find is that intersection where we can be both for good and for profit at the same time, and we can create sustainable businesses that can have a broader impact on the society and the people around us. I call that doing good business while doing good, and that really is the choice that we all have, and that's the opportunity we all have to make a bigger impact. So do good business while we do good. Yeah, Phil, I get it, but how do I start? Where do I go? And I'd say, well, the key to start on this journey is what I'd call being conscious. Very simple, very straightforward, but being conscious will help us get there. If we think about conscious as a definition, conscious talks about our own consciousness of ourself and our conscious and unconscious bias. And unconscious bias, I was fascinated to read about. There are 180 of them recognized now. It's an entirely natural thing, but it's the way we process and trigger information based on our exposure and upbringing. It can be bad, but having them is natural. So what we have to understand is how we filter and control and recognize unconscious bias so that it can then inform better decision making. On being conscious of what's outside, again, if we think about the world of social media, let's think about being conscious of all of the content and the aspects of the content, the creator, the content, the language, the imagery, the words, the meaning, the semantics of it, and being much more rounded in our understanding. So if we're more aware of ourselves and we're more aware of what exists around us, we can actually make these really big differences. So being conscious really sets us apart. Being conscious means we're compelled to take a stand. We're compelled to shine a light, and we're absolutely compelled to start a journey, and a journey to a better, more appropriate and effective media ecosystem. What I want to share with you now is the 4 phases of consciousness, and it's sort of interesting to go, how do we go from, I was doing a thing and I thought it was okay and I didn't realize there were problems, through to I haven't created any problems, so I can spontaneously just do the right thing. So how do we go from not knowing to be harmful to being just intentionally positive? And I want to walk you through those 4 steps, because really it's a roadmap for all of us. The first phase of this is being unconsciously unconscious. Sounds a bit crazy and a mouthful, but by being unconsciously unconscious, I don't know I'm being harmful. I don't know if I'm doing things that are negative, and I don't know if things I'm doing are harmful. A good example of this would be brand safety. The great efforts by the industry, and I was part of it in sort of 2017, 18, 19, to introduce brand safety that would avoid brands being put next to dangerous or inappropriate or toxic content. The intent was wonderful. The unintended consequences, though, were we ended up discriminating, excluding, and blocking out different groups and societies and creators from the narrative of the advertising landscape. You would be amazed if I said, I've seen lists where people are going, I don't include advertising to gay people or black people or Muslim people or people who believe in global warming, who have actually understood and believed there was a COVID pandemic. But actually, all of those words in many cases are exclusion words, which means that content that includes any of those is actually blocked from being able to carry advertising. Seems crazy, doesn't it? That's what I mean by being unconsciously unconscious. You're doing things, you think it's okay, but there's an underlying harmfulness that we have to address. That allows us to move into the next stage, which is be consciously unconscious. So I know there's an issue because I'm conscious of it, but I'm still in the system where we are creating negative and harmful impacts. So I would say to all of you, if you're currently out there and you have keyword lists and you look at brand safety from that point of view and suitability, go and look at them. If you can find a keyword list and it still has, I've seen them, Muslim women, Greta Thunberg, the Pope, Barack Obama, if those are still on your keyword list, you're consciously unconscious. You're aware there's a problem, you're looking, but there's still harm being created. What we'd like to do is get to the level 3, which is being consciously conscious. At this level, I'm aware of it, I actively think about it, I've sorted through all these things that are systemic in my business, and I've addressed them to take the bad stuff away. So I'm now consciously conscious. I'm making a positive impact because I've taken the bad stuff, the harmful stuff away, and I'm focusing on the helpful. You would think, aha, that's enough. Job done, finished, down, I can go now. No. There's a 4th step, and the 4th step I think is the magic one, which is being unconsciously conscious. And by this stage, it's just automatic that we don't create harm in the first place. Wouldn't that be better to not create harm in the first place than have to go through steps to remove it and resolve it? So being unconsciously conscious is really the sort of nirvana step, the final step, where we just behave in a spontaneous, automatic, intentional way to do things right in the first place. As I share those will be the 4 stages we go through, and those are the stages that allow us to think about where we are now, what we have to do next, and that journey we need to plan to make sure that we can reduce the negativity of harmful content and we can increase the positivity of helpful content. And by doing it, we increase the media positivity and the wellness of everyone around us. So I'd just like to refer to an old friend and colleague of mine, Luis Tacoma. He was at a brand safety summit in New York in December 22, and Rob Rakowitz from GARM asked him the final question, said, "What is your one ask of the industry?" And he put it very simply. He said, "My number one ask, please check your inclusion and exclusion lists. Don't just avoid the bad, raise those that need more investment. Think about D&I creators, support good journalism. If we do this, we'll create a more trusted and a more valid media landscape." The first instruction, the first go-to action when you get home tonight or you get in the office tomorrow morning, check your inclusions and exclusions and make sure they're not biased, make sure they're not causing harm in the intent of doing good. So that takes me to Section 3, real-world implications and opportunities. So we have to drive business growth as well as driving sustainability, inclusiveness, and responsibility. So it's really that balance. And if I would reference maybe a global marketer that many of you are aware of would be, say, the Mars Company. And Jackie is responsible for sustainability and inclusion, and Tony's responsible for media pricing and performance. They're actually a team. The whole idea is that they can achieve together versus it's either cheap or it's inclusive. It's either cheap or responsible. And I think what I want to share with you is that it can truly be both. And that makes a huge, huge difference in the potential of how we go forward. The areas that I'd like you to focus on as we think about real-world implications probably fall into 3 very maligned areas. The first area is DE&I and DE&IB. The second area is sustainability. And the third area is civic society. So The reason I'm highlighting these three is the special interest categories within D&IB when we think about race, ethnicity, religion, disability, mental health, age, gender, sexual orientation, sexual preference, have been areas where there's sort of sensitivity to much of that language. And therefore, these have in many cases been deemed unsafe and unsuitable, and therefore creators talking about these issues have been excluded. I'll give you an example that I find incredible. For anyone who supports the NFL and was ever an Eagles fan, then there was a guy called Emmanuel Archo, a linebacker for the Eagles, became a New York Times best-selling author, an award-winning Emmy producer, and he has a social media channel, which is Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. He talks about things that are real and realistic and relevant to society. And one of the calls he had, and one of the sessions was how to cure racism. Quite a big issue, we would think. And who do you think he wanted to interview? He talked with Barack Obama, the US's first ever black president. So you got this black icon talking to the first ever black president of how to cure racism. Wouldn't you think that was a really good thing? And that should almost be compulsory sort of viewing for all of us? Nah. Most systems currently in place deem that as being unsuitable because they see the word racism, they don't see how to cure. And this is this issue that we have within the industry is that we have a singular view versus a contextual view of things, and then we have to make decisions. So to me, that's abhorrent on so many levels, but that's an issue why, I'm just giving an example from D&I, that this sector and these topics and these conversations have been overly blocked. Sustainability is another incredible one. The data would suggest 97% of the world's scientists have shown that there's positive evidence for climate change. 3% don't. Interestingly, in most people's keyword lists, and I've seen it, climate change, global warming, activism, even Greta Thunberg are deemed as unsuitable. Doesn't make sense to me. Certainly if we think about the weather and the trauma that we've had around the world in the last 12 months would certainly not make sense. But sustainability is a topic, again, very vulnerable. We have one client in Europe who actually makes fossil-free power generation of electricity. That would be a great thing. We all need electricity, but we'd rather do it without increasing carbon. Their own technical videos on the internet get blocked and deemed unsuitable because they mention climate change. So sustainability, big issue. And the last one, civic society. Wouldn't peace and democracy be a lovely thing? 2024 is going to be an incredible year for elections all around the world. Europe, North America, South America, Asia, the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, etc. So this idea of having proper informed conversations about these topics would seem really useful, let alone getting into human rights, women's rights, pro-life, pro-choice debate, and issues of responsible journalism. These are all areas that have been impacted. So what I'd like us to do is make sure that these things that are really important to consumers, really important to brands, really important to society, really important to families, are things that are okay to talk about, to be monetized, and be part of the conversation. So what I would share with you is this opportunity to do good business while doing good. And to punctuate that, I want to quote Mark Pritchard, who is the Chief Brand Officer of Procter & Gamble. And he said that actually by re-including previously excluded audiences from many of those groups I've just mentioned, that re-inclusion of those extra audiences has driven half of all of their brand growth for the last 3 years. So this isn't about just doing the right thing because it feels good and it's right. It's doing because actually it's a really good business. And thanks to Mark Pritchard and coming out and sharing that, we know it to be true. So we can all do good business while doing good. Which takes me to the road ahead. We have a choice to make. We need to go, yeah, not my problem, all good. Or we can go, I need to know more. I think I can make a difference. I want to do something. How? So let's think about how we each make a difference, how we lean forward. What I would say is you've got to plan your journey. We're never going to be perfect. And as my mum would tell me, I'm far from perfect. But we have to plan our journey. And as we plan our journey, we've got to think about where we are now, where we want to go next, and what's the team we want to gather together to go on this journey. There's a South African proverb that I absolutely love, and it comes up all the time in my mind when I think about this road ahead. It said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with friends. And I think the key to this is you plan your transition and evolution to be more of a conscious business. Choose your friends carefully, gather a team, and together you can do anything and make any difference. Now, some people say, but it's too big. It's too big. It's more than I can do. And I would say, can I remind you of the DOT principle? And they go, what's the DOT principle? It's lovely. Credited some different people, but Danny Seo is one of the people credited with it. And the idea of DOT, do one thing. If I try and solve the melting of the ice caps, or I try and solve racial discrimination, or I try and solve ethnic discrimination and exclusion and harassment, maybe that's too big for me as a single person. But the principle of the DOT, do one thing, is if I just do one little thing, a dot, it's incidental, it's tiny, it's this little thing. But if I just do that dot, it's really easy to do a DAT, which is do another thing. And when I do another thing, somebody else does the first thing. And my dot, 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 and your dot, dot, dots all add up. And eventually, instead of it being one isolated little dot of an action, it's this huge kaleidoscope of image that we've created together that drives foundational and systemic change. So the DOT principle, if you just do one thing, it will trigger you to do another thing, and it'll trigger other people to do their one thing. And with that, we will make a difference. Just want to wrap up together with the thought that what we talked about, we truly can make a difference, but we can only make it if we do it together, and if we do it through this lens of being conscious. And if we think about how we are internally in terms of the way we think and process, how we think about what's around us and the decisions we make, we can act together to make a bigger societal difference, not only in driving commerce and profit and performance for advertising and for brands and for businesses, because in most cases we're in a capitalist economy, but also in a way that drives inclusion, sustainability, and belonging, so we can be right for people and planet and profit. Sounds perfect to me. So please join us on that journey. Thank you very much.